Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server co-location, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, January 7, 2019 Board of Selectmen's meeting. We are going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No proclamations. Next item on the agenda will be recognition. Ms. Braga.
Thank you. I just want to read a letter that we received, and it was addressed to the Board of Selectmen, but really the praise is not really for anyone on this board necessarily, but for members of our town. So I'd just like to read a letter from Francis McCarthy. It says, Dear members of the board, it is refreshing to have prompt attention be given to address and oversight to repair damage caused by last winter's storm on the property of the North Falmouth Library. With sincere appreciation and a big thank you on behalf of everyone, including myself, I write this letter. May I take this opportunity to thank one and all for the beautiful holiday display on the Village Green in Falmouth and other areas. A big thank you and best wishes this new year of 2019. Just wanted to say, huge thanks to DPW, to all the volunteers for the display on the Village Green and for all the town staff that just really put a lot of work into the holiday season, but also to address some of these issues after all of those storms last year. I know that the town is still trying to deal with some of the damage that was caused, and it's just, this letter is just a recognition that this individual, as well as this board and the town, really appreciate the efforts of all the town departments and staff.
Great.
And thank you to
Appreciate that.
Francis McCarthy for writing that letter. It's
That's
nice to
very
get that.
nice. Nice to hear the good stuff as well as, any kind of concerns, which we appreciate and certainly get enough of as well. Next, we have announcements. First issue, is there anyone who wants to record this meeting who is in the room? Thank you. Seeing none. Next announcement, we're going to be sending out to committee chairs the just kind of some information. Doug Brown is doing some work on the committee purposes and how they, just want to update what they do. We'll also be looking at the Board of Selectmen liaisons. We'll send the chairs the names of the liaisons. They're available online, but we'll let liaisons from the Board of Selectmen are the folks for committees to contact if you want to either have some assistance with any kind of question or project, or if you just really have, a concern that you want to have answered through the Board of Selectmen's office or the town manager. So we'll send out those names as well. Any other announcements? Okay, next on the agenda is public comment. Public comment is a 10-minute period at the beginning of the Board of Selectmen's meeting for a 2-minute announcement with respect to an item that is not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who is here for public comment? Mr. Halen.
Good evening, Michael Heelan, Cliffwood Lane. I just wanted to comment briefly on the town charter. Town charter 5-3 subsection B4 says that the town manager, one of his duties is to inform the Board of Selectmen on all departmental operations, fiscal affairs, general problems, administrative actions, and to this end shall submit periodic reports to the board. Sometime in late July, early August, we have now been made aware that town manager met with town council, the planning department, building commissioner, Board of Health agent, and according to the Cape Cod Times article, Ms. Moran was unsure of these plans for the needle exchange in East Falmouth, and Mr. Brown also said that he did not receive the email, even though IT did say it was sent. I am hoping that somebody on the Board of Selectmen, preferably 3 people, will open up a review process on the town manager's role according to this charter item. If this meeting did occur in early August and there was no discussion of this until an email that was possibly sent out in November, that is a huge issue. Now, whether or not the AIDS needle exchange program does go in, this is sure to cost taxpayers of this town hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. There will be lawsuits. Property values will go down. And I am imploring anyone on the Board of Selectmen, preferably 3, to start this review process. Now, if you choose not to start this review process, it is a clear indication to the people of East Falmouth how much you respect or don't respect them and their neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
Mark Finneran, Precinct 6. I'd like to just take this time to remind everyone who's watching and everyone who's here that we do have the meeting Saturday morning at 9 o'clock at the high school in the auditorium. It's a chance for you to get heard regarding the needle exchange because obviously you weren't heard on upwards to 4 occasions. I think that anyone and everyone who has any interest should come out and show the leaders of this town and the planning board that we deserve the same that the people of Hyannis got from their Board of Health. And nothing short should be accepted, as these open meeting law violations still remain and will be pursued through the state. And anybody with any logic can understand that it's things just like this that were the impetus of the open meeting law to begin with. That's enough. Everybody show up, please.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. The next item on the agenda, under Summary of Actions, we have an administrative order, vote to support application to DCR 2019 Mass Trails Grants Program for funding to build the parking area at the gateway to the Coonamessett Greenway Heritage Trail. Mr. Suso, do you want to introduce that? And
thank you.
I see Dr. Gladfelder is here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As the board is aware, we've been the fortunate beneficiaries of much very positive activity in terms of the Coonamessett Greenway Heritage Trail and the related processes, and there are multiple phases have been involved. The most recent one is brought to you for consideration for supporting an application for continued outside financial assistance. And as you've noted, Betsy Gladfelter, who has been a tireless advocate for this important program and a great visionary in this process, is with us this evening and might be available for some additional comments.
Dr. Gladfelder, do you want to just give us a quick overview? I know that we have some numbers here. The total project value, almost $1.5 million, and a grant amount requested for up to 80% of the total project value at $285,500.
Hi, thank you. My name's Betsy Gladfelter. I'm with the Conservation Commission. And this is part of a project that we're working with, the town is working with the 300 Committee to develop the Coonamessett Greenway Heritage Trail. I think I was here a month ago for a different grant proposal, which is part of this, to do the interpretive signs. This would be, we're requesting money from DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, to develop the major parking area. This is where groups come, this is where the school groups come, and right now, we have to have the school buses stop on John Parker Road, which works because the sign goes out and people stop. But this will enable school buses to come in and about 20 to 25 cars. And the parking area will have access to a river overlook and trails that go down to what we call the Lower Loop Trail, which is about 1 mile long. It'll have 2 boardwalks. One boardwalk is there. If you haven't been there, it's very nice to walk there, and soon, a few months, we'll have a second one. And this will entirely be a wheelchair accessible trail. And the 300 Committee has been a very strong partner of this.
Excellent. Any questions from the board?
One
Doug.
very minor one. Just in the application, there's a page with 3 pictures in the year 2000XX, and I think it was intended to put in the whatever years it was at some point.
It is. It is. There are a few other, Sam has given up pointing out mistakes I have to get it to you in time
Okay.
and then ask for letters. Yeah, I know that XX is there, and Jessica is, the Coonamessett River Trust is on alert to give me that information.
Great, okay.
It says draft.
Wasn't sure where it was heading from us, whether it was going right away or.
I have
Yeah.
one
Yeah,
question.
it's there. Doug knows all about that.
I know about that part.
It's called the Bridge Over the River Flax,
Yeah.
and it's been very effective.
Yes. When you say that it's going to be handicap accessible or wheelchair accessible.
Right.
Is that meaning just the boardwalk, or do you?
No, we have, the 300 committee already has some funds, and they're raising more funds, so the entire trail will be, stone dust
Yeah.
base.
Okay. And is there any plans to do anything like that around the perimeter of the bog area, or will that
Well,
just stay
it'll
natural?
be the whole perimeter.
Oh, it will be?
Yeah, so the walk that you do now, I
Yeah.
call that the lower loop
Yeah.
trail.
Oh, so all that's going to be enhanced?
All of it.
Oh,
The
okay.
middle dam will go, but there'll be swifts crossing.
Yeah,
So the whole thing will be, and there'll be parking above, and you can walk down to that trail.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still leave a little bit of parking at by the bridge over the River Flax.
yeah.
So that people who don't want to have to go quite as far can go.
Okay,
So
great.
the goal is that all ages and all ability. One of the things that was brought up in the discussion was that we realize that we have sort of an elderly community here that is very active in many ways. And so it's to accommodate people of all abilities.
Okay, great, thanks.
Super. Any other questions?
I would move that we vote to support the application to the DCR.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Another great project by Dr. Gladfelder. Next, we have on the agenda, under business, presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget. I want to really, on behalf of my fellow selectmen, recognize all of the staff folks and committee members who are in the room. It's really impressive in terms of all the time that you give to make sure the town gets the services that it needs for, the best possible money. And just as a board, we certainly appreciate the opportunity to actually have, see you in the room, ask questions if we need to. So thank you very much for your hard work and for coming this evening.
And if we don't ask you a question, please don't be offended that you're here for some time and we don't ask you any questions.
In fact, if I might say, this report is so comprehensive that all the questions that came to mind, I actually was able to find the answers, so I'm not gonna ask very many questions. It's so comprehensive, and I really appreciate all the hard work to provide this kind of detail and backup.
Very, very impressive. And some of the credit, of course, goes to the town manager and to the finance director, Jennifer Petit. Mr. Suso.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you know, and as you've already commented, this important annual operating budget process is pursuant to the Falmouth Town Charter. The proposed budget is presented to the board pursuant to the charter prior to January 1 of each year. And between January 1 and January 15th or 16th, I forget that exact date, maybe the 16th, the board is tasked with reviewing, discussing, obviously this presentation is part of that, the proposed budget, and ultimately transmitting it to the Finance Committee to begin their important deliberative work on behalf of the upcoming April town meeting. And so we look forward to that. And I do also want to echo your very appropriate comments and thanks to all the staff members, department heads, division heads, and others assembled in this room for the extraordinary work that began on this budget essentially late last summer. And there was the capital portion was an important element. Obviously, the budget, the board's policies on spending and financial matters you adopt each year, and those are brought forward working in close cooperation with Finance Director Jennifer Petit. And I really want to thank Jennifer and all her colleagues in the Finance Department for their extraordinary leadership in moving this important process forward, and also to thank those committee members who are in attendance as well, including some members of our Finance Committee who I recognize in joining us tonight. So we look forward to participating with them in the weeks and months to come in further deliberations and discussions on the budget. Having said that, I would like to pass the microphone over to Finance Director Jennifer Petit, who has a PowerPoint presentation summarizing the FY 2020 annual operating budget.
Good evening, and thank you very much for being here this evening. And this is a whole new setup, so now I have all these TVs, and so you're just gonna have to bear with me just 1 minute as I log in. Oh, and Peter is very helpful trying to get this presentation up and running. I really do want to take a minute to thank everyone and everybody's participation in the FY 20 budget. I know we have some members of the Finance Committee here. Finance Committee Chair Keith Schwagel, Judy Mignani, Mary Harris were some of the people that I saw here this evening, so thank you for coming. And I also want to thank my department, the Finance Department. They've been so supportive. This budget process starts in September, and as you can tell, this is the second year that it's really taken on a different look, and the budget is a lot more comprehensive with a lot more information than it has been in years past. And special thanks to Ann Bastille, who really has been helping putting all this together and checking the numbers, and her IT experience, with has been very helpful. So thank you for everyone for supporting this process and supporting me during this process. So the FY 20 budget, I'm gonna kind of walk around like I normally do. One of the, I always try to think about what we want to present, and what have we been looking for. I have them.
Need to keep the microphone close.
That's right, I do.
Jennifer.
I can't walk around. I forgot I used to have something that used to, I could walk around with. So anyways, I always like to, try to highlight some of the things of, what we've been able to accomplish and what we're looking at going into FY 20. And the town has reached and maintained its fund balance policy. So if you remember a couple years ago in 2017, the Board of Selectmen adopted an overall fiscal policy, and we revamped that to look, to really adopt some procedures from the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. Thank you, Peter.
There you go.
All right, so I can walk around with this now? Okay, good, thank you. And so we revamped the financial policies, support, the Board of Selectmen voted that. And in that, we had some ranges for our reserves, and we've actually maintained and reached those ranges. We're on the high end. So what does that help us with is that the monies, and we voted this in the budget policy in FY 20 as well, is that we've reached our stabilization fund goal, which has been great. And so we're reallocating those funds to our other post-employment benefit trust fund, and some of that will go to the workers' compensation trust fund. So now what we're looking at is we want to maintain our reserves. In the policy, we don't use reserves to fund operations. It's really for emergency. And we have been able to tap into a little bit of our capital stabilization, and that's been a balance. But we've really reached those goals, so this will help with our financials and our liability. So our stabilization funds, in our general right now, we have about $6.2 million. In our capital stabilization, we have 4.3. In our debt stabilization, we have about 1.6. And I'll get into that because debt's my favorite subject, so I'll get into that a little bit more in the presentation. Revenues and expenses, and I know everybody gets sick of hearing this, but reoccurring revenue for reoccurring expenses and one-time revenue for one-time expenses. And what does that do? That helps us sustain our operations and our fiscal will, if you will, during tough times. You don't want to use one-time expenses to fund reoccurring items because you can't sustain that, and that's when you run into problems. And so with the strong fiscal policies of the board, we've been able to sustain this over a number of years and really reach our fund balance reserves policies, which has been great. And so our revenue policy. We looked at that in the FY 20 budget, and the board supported the recommendation of, and usually we kind of look at this every year. We have four revenue sources that support the operating budget, and 74% of the revenue is property taxes. And there's really not a lot you can do with property taxes. You can only raise them 2.5% every year without a voter approval. And we haven't had an override in a number of years. So there's not a lot of places to go when you're looking at raising revenue. And the limits, you know, like I just stated, are due to Proposition 2.5. So that's a good segue into our estimated local receipts. Our estimated local receipts really can fluctuate with the economy. And as you know, we've had a strong economy and we've had strong estimated receipts over the last year. And it really kind of, what we bring in the actual revenue over our estimates, really what funds our free cash, that funds our capital budget. And they've been very strong, to the tune of about maybe, turning back maybe 6 million. And so, and this is what makes up your estimated local receipts: your motor vehicle excise, hotel, motel, and meals, departmental revenue, your water and sewer revenue, beach, licenses and permits, your building permits, real indication of a strong economy. Also, motor vehicle excises too. People are buying cars, we're getting more revenue in for that. Your ambulance fees, special assessments, those have gone up because of the betterments for the Little Pond Source Service area, and investment income. We've been earning a little bit more in our money in our bank, so our investment income has been increasing lately as well. So if you look at the budget, we've increased our estimates by about 2.6 million. That 1.2 million that we've increased is to offset the water and wastewater debt. If you recall, over the last couple of years in our financial plan, because we borrowed the money from the trust, we really had no control on when we were going to start paying principal and interest on those two major water filtration project and the sewer project. And so we had put some money away into our debt stabilization fund, and we've been using that to reduce the tax burden, because when we presented those two major projects to the community, we said we weren't going to raise those taxes more than the 2.5% allowable, and we've been able to do that. And so we don't need to rely on the debt stabilization. We've had water rate increases. We wanted to wait a year, and we also have the betterment revenue coming in. So the 1.2 million is in the local estimated receipts was planned for, and we're able to increase that. The remaining 1.4 million increase was due to a strong estimated receipt growth over the last few years, and we are getting some additional funds from the community host agreement for the medical marijuana. We did not estimate receipts from the short-term rental legislation, and so I just want to spend a minute on that. The governor just signed that a couple weeks ago or a week ago, and so we're starting to get some information regarding this. The good news is it starts July 1st, and they will mirror. Right now, Falmouth has adopted for the regular hotel motel is 4%. And so without any town meeting action or action on the board, they will automatically start paying another 4% on the short-term rentals. We do not have to adopt that. We have some other decisions that we probably want to be making, and I don't want to, we still have a lot of information that's coming in, but right now we know that we'll be getting an additional 4% from the short-term rental legislation as of July 1st. We've been fielding questions coming in and trying to get that information out. So the good news is we've had strong estimated receipt growth, but we didn't need this to balance our budget. So that will fuel the estimated receipts anyways, and it will keep a strong free cash, so we can keep a strong capital program.
Just a quick pause on that. We will have a separate agenda item very soon on the rental legislation, likely probably the next meeting, just in terms of what we know today, just so the public can get more information.
Okay, great. So in the FY20 budget, we used $22.35 million in estimated local receipts to balance the budget. We have additional water, sewer, and special assessment revenue to offset the debt, which I just discussed. And so just a couple mentions here is that when we had the financial plan for the water filtration plant, we wanted to generate about $1.2 million in additional water revenue. And if you recall, about a year and a half ago, we came in front of the board and requested a water rate increase to generate about that. It really hasn't generated as much as we would like, but we need to come in, and we did mention that we would be coming in. You will be seeing us in the next few months with another water rate increase in order to offset that debt. In your 5-year strategic plan, there is mention of looking at a water enterprise fund, and I just want to let you know we've done the analysis for that. We aren't proposing a water enterprise fund for 2020. There's one important component to that is we really need to migrate off a Top Gun for the water billing and purchase another system for that, and we are looking at that right now. We need a system that we can segregate the revenues and really be able to analyze it before we just jump into a water enterprise fund. So we are analyzing it, we are following the strategic plan, but it just isn't a recommendation for 2020 at this point.
And Jennifer, you might, for the listening audience, Top Gun is IT technology.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's not the movie.
It's the basis on which we have done a lot of billing and keep records, accounting records.
But it's as old as the movie.
It
So
is,
that's
you're
the
right,
point.
exactly.
That's why it's named Top Gun, and that's why it has to go.
Exactly. We
really
had
old.
a wonderful IT department with a lot of programmers, and so we have a lot of programs, and they wrote the program on COBOL. And so we've been trying to migrate off of COBOL, which we call Top Gun, and we still have some lingering programs. And the next one is the water, because we do generate about $8.3 million a year from water revenue, so that's important. But we're getting close. We're looking at software. We just need to get there. And then the other funding component of the budget are your other available funds: parking meter revenue, embarkation fees, wetlands and waterways, energy receipts, golf revenues. This will be the last year that the golf revenues will fully offset the debt. If you remember, when we purchased the golf course, we received money from the 300 Committee for the conservation.
Restriction.
Thank you, the conservation restriction. And it's been supplementing the debt, and that money has run out, but the yearly revenue doesn't support the debt service. Debt service is about $600,000 a year. We bring in about $4 million. So in 2021 will be the first year that we'll have to start putting that into the you'll have tax revenues that will support that. Community preservation, bond premiums, and we do have some debt stabilization in here as well. Property taxes, we have 2.5% levy capacity. We don't, per the board's policy, we don't increase our taxes more than the 2.5%. We've used an estimated new growth figure of $700,000. We've been able to use that for the last couple of years, and it comes in more than that. We want to be conservative with our revenue and not run into problems when we're trying to balance our budget and set our tax rate. And we have a short-term interest is offset by $600,000 from the Debt Stabilization Fund. And I'll take a minute. I will be coming in front of the board in the end of January. We're looking at borrowing about $17.8 million for the senior center, athletic fields, some wastewater, monies that are out there we need to borrow for. And so that's an estimated interest amount for next year. So these are our four sources of revenue, and as you can tell, property taxes really take up the brunt of that. Appropriation policy. Our increases in the budget this year are consistent with the Board of Selectmen's strategic plan and reserve accounts. The good news is we're still able to allocate about $1.6 million from reoccurring revenue into our reserves, which is really strong. Other communities will just kind of target, extra money that they might have to put into their OPEB trust or reserve accounts. We consistently, fund that with the reoccurring revenue. So if you look at our budget increases this year, I like to put money amounts. Our fixed cost increases a lot of times just really eat up our 2.5%. Health insurance, we've had a really good year with our health insurance, with our claims, and the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has done a really good job with stewarding their reserves and putting them aside so they can look and reduce the rate even further. So we're looking at a 5% rate, and we still have a good buffer in that account ever since the legislation from a few years ago when we were able to made it easier to negotiate with the unions on your health insurance. So that's the increase there. The retirement assessment is a little bit higher. It's about 6.91%. The retirement board voted a couple of years ago to maintain, I think it was 2033 to be fully funded, so we want to stay with that, and we've been able to do that. The school department budget is 2.3%, was almost $1.1 million. And the Upper Cape VOTEC is a 13% increase, rather large. We're looking at 5 additional students. I do think that that will go down, though. That was just an estimate at this point. As you know, at this time in the budget, there are estimates that we have to, as we go through the budget process, we'll refine a little bit more as we get more information in, and we'll update the board when we have those changes. So our budget increases, what have we really, it's a big year. We're looking at 4 additional police officers, 2 additional firefighters, 2 additional full-time parks employees, and that will add a field maintenance crew. We've been discussing with the DPW, because we know our fields, we've been really trying to make some headway there. Full-time program coordinator for the senior center, that will be effective January 1st. We're looking at a completion date around that time for the building, maybe a little bit sooner. Additional 2 seasonal positions for the recreation summer camp for assistants, and additional seasonal assistants for animal control. And another increase in the budget was if you recall, in November, we went to town meeting to adjust our wage schedule for seasonal and temporary employees, because it's hard to maintain, particularly the DPW and parks, and, the beaches, to, have people reoccur, keep coming back, and be competitive with the wages with other communities, and with the minimum wage that just went up again on January 1st. So I'm going to talk a little bit about debt. I know people don't get as excited about it as I do, but I really feel that I need to touch on it. Our excluded debt and capital exclusions will be issued in a manner that stabilizes the tax levy over a number of years. The finance director will maintain a financing plan that calculates the current and future debt capacity, which I have done. So in the last 3 fiscal years with our 2 major projects, and as you know, we're embarking on a couple more major projects with the senior center and the athletic field, we have incorporated $82.5 million over the long term, but the principal and interest on $82.5 million into our budget. Our debt did decrease from last year, and we've been able to maximize that. With the short-term interest, I will be transferring in $600,000 from the Debt Stabilization Fund to reduce the levy to keep it within the 2.5. And also with the Little Pond sewer betterments and the water and sewer revenue. I do want to mention that when the bills went out for the Little Pond sewer betterments, we did receive about $1.5 million of payoffs where people weren't going to pay it off over a 30-year period. They paid it off right away. And so we've been able to, with the Municipal Relief Act, we're able to set that money aside and transfer that in every year in order to reduce the debt, because that's really what it's for. But sometimes it's hard to maintain that. You don't know who's going to pay off their betterment and when, but we've been able to reserve it. But I think that's, worth a mention that there were a few that paid them off.
Do you know what percentage that was? Like 5% of people paid off, or?
I don't. I didn't do that calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Could I have a quick question on that?
Sure.
Would you say that may be attributed to purchase and sales of houses? Is the payment transferable to a new owner, or does it have to be paid off?
No, that's a good question for Tricia. Yeah, why don't you? Thank you.
Good evening, Tricia Favoli, Director of Assessing. Yes, it is assumable if the lender allows them. That's the biggest problem. There's only on the Cape right now 3 or 4 lenders, local lenders, that will allow them to assume the betterment, but the bigger banks, the TD banks, the Bank of Boston, it's a cloud on the title, so they won't let them assume it. I would say probably 3/4 of the payoffs that we have been based on sales.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tricia. And so this is the spreadsheet that I've presented a few times over the last few years. And as you can see, the debt, now I know that there's Peter showed me how to do this, so I want to see if I can. There we go. All right. So as you can tell, this is where we want to maintain our debt. And so we've been able to maintain it. It starts in 2018 here. And then as you can see, we're going to have a lot of debt drop off in 2023, but this is how we've been able to maintain that. And I've been able to update the spreadsheet with the athletic field, the projects, the Northwest Fire Station, existing debt and school roofs in the senior center. So some are going to come due a lot quicker than others, but we do have plans for that. And I will be coming in front of the board in order. This is a whole different presentation, but it just kind of shows you how we implement it into the budget. So our operating budget, and this kind of just gives you a visual of where the expenses go. And now the education, I know it can look a little bit low, but it is the school and Upper Cape Tech. As you know, the school department is funded by a lot of other revenue that is not in the general fund budget. So funding reserves. We've been able to fund over $1 million allocated to our capital stabilization, and that has worked out really well. As you know, we funded a ladder truck and we've funded ambulance from that. And so we haven't had to do any borrowing or pay interest on that. We've been able to pay cash, and that's what we've been able to do. And actually with the water main replacement on Main Street, we've been able to pay cash for that, not for the whole thing, but $4.5 million. So, you know, that's a good thing. The Stabilization Fund has reached its goal, and we're reallocating. We're funding the OPEB trust at $500,000, and the Workers' Compensation Trust in the amount of $140,000. Other non-voted appropriations that you won't see at town meeting are state assessments and our allowance for abatements. That basically just comes in from the state, and we're able to raise that when we set the tax rate. So in conclusion, the new positions will result in an increase in service to the community. We are experiencing significant cost increases. The budget allows for flexibility, as we always try to do when we, embark on that year. And there's always continued implementation of further exploration of departmental reorganization and cost-saving measures. So, in a nutshell, that's really the budget presentation.
Quick question?
Sure.
So, do we have a reserve that includes our sort of infrastructure planning? In other words, the fact that just generally we're looking at a lot of big maintenance issues going forward at this point, or where would those funds come from?
Well, I probably need an example, and I think we've had this discussion. So there's a lot out there that can happen that we don't know, especially with the coastline. We have committees looking at that. We've been getting grants to study that. What happens when you have a big storm? Those are the things I think about, emergency measures. We do have funds set aside. If we have an emergency and we need funds, we have money in the General Stabilization Fund. For maintenance is built into the operating budget. If there's something specific you're talking about, maintenance, I can address that.
Sort of both of those things were what I was thinking, so you answered it.
Okay.
Well,
Sam?
can I piggyback on that? Because I know that at the state level, there's concern about the Chapter 90 funds that the state gives us for road maintenance and infrastructure. And the fact that we're not, at least preliminarily, we're not being allocated as much as we have in previous years. So it really goes along to that question. Are we able to rely on state funds? Are we going to be able to have enough funds to keep up with the road and bridge maintenance that we need to do?
Well, you bring up a really good point. Well, one of the things I do want to address is in the capital plan, we do fund our roads to the tune of about $800,000 every year. We don't fund more than that. I know there's a lot that needs to be done because we don't have the crews or the manpower actually to keep up with the funding. So one of the balances that we look at is that when we fund something, we want to make sure we're able to do it. And we just don't appropriate the money and it sits aside. So when we look at the capital budget, we will have a discussion with DPW, and if there's a significant decrease in Chapter 90 money, then what we'll want to do is supplement that with our capital money in November, because then that will be the offset for that. But we always want to make sure that we have the crews and the manpower to keep up with it.
But in that regard, we also contract out
Yes.
to private companies to do a lot of that road work as well, and I see them all over Cape Cod, so.
Right. Yeah, we do that as well. We do prepare, we're on a yearly bid list, but there's a lot of admin work to go out with that, especially when you're using Chapter 90 money. There's a different procurement, well, it's the same procurement process, but there's different thresholds that you have to meet when you tap into that money. So you always want to make sure that you're maintaining that and doing the proper paperwork. So there's a little admin for that as well.
Doug?
On the stabilization funds, I guess those would be town meeting articles where they get funded?
Yes.
And in the packet we have, it's still listing for the fiscal year 20 recommendation, it's still listing the old numbers. As
I
of-
know, and I'm glad you brought that up, Doug. So I have new sheets for you.
Okay.
So this is, and I meant, I'm sitting there and I'm standing there and I'm giving my budget presentation and I forgot to pass these out. So you just want to replace it. It doesn't affect the bottom line.
No, it's just, instead of,
You're right.
it's zeroed out some places.
And I also put the short-term debt in there as well because that was an estimate that I got in the end.
Now, in
Is
gen-
this rehearsed?
Are you a
in
math
general
teacher or something?
stabilization, are we
Thank you.
still putting in some of the meals tax for our budget policy, or is that gonna be zero?
That will be stewarded towards the other post-employment benefits. It was an issue that we addressed in our in the budget policy in FY '20.
Okay, that we gave ourselves the flexibility that we did not have
Yeah.
to stick to that. At one point, we said 75% of the meals tax was always gonna go to that stabilization fund.
For the
But I think-
capital.
Oh, for the capital, okay.
Yes, and so that we stuck with that, so what happened was, that 2.5, the 0.25%, I believe, was from the levy.
Right.
And so what happened was, this was a number of years ago, when I first started, it was a couple different members of the board, but I think you were on the board, Doug, at that time. And so we had a lengthy discussion of, are we gonna just compound that every year? And my recommendation was we couldn't, because we couldn't sustain it, because that means we're just eating up our levy. So we kind of capped it and just at that amount of the 440 and the million. So we just transferred that over. I will look at the budget policy again, and when I come before you in September, make sure that if that needs a wording change, I'll look at that.
And the second question I had was concerning the debt exclusion for the field, as to what we're planning to come forward. Is when would we have to go to the town to get a debt exclusion for the new athletic field?
We've done it.
Yeah, we've already done
Because
it.
I guess that's where I was confused, because it's in here, it's saying that we are planning on going to the town for debt exclusion, and I thought we had already done that, so.
Okay, yeah, maybe it was a
Yeah.
wording change that I should have probably picked up on as I was going through the document. But we did go.
Oh, that's what I thought, okay.
We
I
did
just-
in May.
I wasn't sure if it was that we had gotten the initial kind of funding, and this was gonna be just moving the funding from a debt exclusion to an override.
No, it is a debt exclusion. I can give you a quick update on the field. They actually opened bids last Thursday, and
Go
we have
ahead.
a construction meeting on January 23rd.
I was gonna report on that, but you do it.
You're on the committee if you want to jump in, Sam, yeah.
Well,
Have anything to add?
I don't want to, I know that the school committee is meeting tomorrow night, and we'll be actually approving a contractor for the overall field construction. But I can say that we had 4 bidders. They were all actually very close in their numbers. And all of them fell within the budgeted amount of money that project has been authorized. So we're in a healthy position, and that even includes some contingency money in case, the unknown unknowns crop up and we have to cover some more costs than what were actually bid by the contractors. I think the one outstanding item that we have to worry a little bit more about is just the locker room facilities, to be able to host an away team and our home team, but that is yet to be worked out.
Right, thank you.
But it's looking very favorable. The bids came in very nicely. All the contractors were well qualified and responsive.
Great, Doug.
So I'm very happy and excited to see that the post-employment benefits is up to $500,000 now. Is that going to be the right number to sustain that account?
Well, I'll tell you what my feeling is on the OPEB and sustainability. I mean, our liability is about $123 million right now. And so let me just address this because it comes up. A few years ago, a number of years ago, GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, they really wanted to have municipal financials start looking like private industry. And so they came with some, requirements that we had to do, like putting our fixed asset on our financial statements. Now, that's a good thing to do. However, we're not closing, we're not gonna be selling our assets in order to, we're not liquidating, we aren't private industry. But, we have been, moving forward with their requirements.
And so with the other post-employment benefits, it's a requirement to put the liability on your financial statements. And what is other post-employment benefits? It's really your health insurance for your retirees. So the liability is if the town of Falmouth shut down today, what would we owe for health insurance? About $123 million. It's not going to happen. However, we have to report the liability. There isn't a funding requirement. They haven't required us to fund it. However, other communities do fund it, and it's good to fund it. It's good for your bond rating. As you know, we received a AAA bond rating last year. So we try to, fund it in a manner that's reasonable, if you will. And so with the $500,000 a year, that is definitely reasonable. We're able to invest it differently than we can with the other trust funds because it's for the long term. It reduces our liability on our financial statements. It looks good to the bondholders, and it's good for our bond rating. We can always change it at some point, even lower it if we want to. So I think this is a really good step in the right direction, but it's such a huge liability that it's hard to wrap your arms around. But I will say, when you look at Falmouth compared to other communities, one of the great things about Falmouth is we've identified a reoccurring revenue source to fund this liability, and especially $500,000 a year. And other communities haven't been able to do that. If they have some extra free cash, they might throw it at it, but to actually build this into our policy and be able to fund it every year is great. But we can always reduce it, we can always increase it as well.
And what can we use that money to?
Thank you, that's what I was just gonna ask.
I mean, I understand that if the town closes, we need to use that money to fund it. What if the town doesn't close, which I don't think it's going to do? What can we use those funds for?
Well, I am simplifying it, obviously, just to understand it. Well, right now, you could, there are some things that we probably wouldn't want to do, but by funding it, we could probably put all our health insurance in the trust fund, and since we're gaining such a large, well, hopefully we'd be gaining more market value because of the way we could invest it, might be easier to fund our health insurance. It might take the burden off us a little bit that way, and that's some of the things we've kind of thrown around, but really not ready to implement as of yet.
Yeah, if I could just jump in and expand on that a little bit. So, we're all in total agreement in terms of, does it make a lot of sense to put $123 million in the bank to let it sit there? Probably not a real high priority. However, one of the more realistic concerns that we do have is that we recently got some great news about a 5% increase in health insurance. That's really unusual. That's a big win. The concern is that continues to go up to a double-digit inflation, and we have more and more retirees living longer. So there is some value, not $123 million worth of value, but some value in both setting aside, dedicating more than we need this year to pay for this year's health insurance in the budget, because if it spikes, over a 10-year period, both for current employees but also for retirees, you don't have an operating budget gyration. So that fund could be used to mitigate future spikes in our annual health insurance cost.
The retirees.
Right.
For retirees,
Fine.
yeah.
You can use it for both current employees and retirees as a practical matter.
Really?
You could.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
And another thing that I think in long-range planning is something that's going to come up is we have so many private roads in Falmouth, and people are starting to take the initiative to ask them to become town roads. Right now, we have about a 10-year waiting period, and I think this is something that's going to probably balloon soon because a lot of these developments are 30 or so years old, and the roads are wearing out. And I wonder what would be the mechanism for would we be able to sort of start a fund that would accommodate those requests?
We actually do have a fund right now. We have a road betterment fund, and it does accommodate the requests. I think a lot of it, what has to do with, I know that we kind of had a little bit of a moratorium on taking private roads, but we were looking at, actually, we're going to come in April, and there is a process to have your road taken.
Oh, I understand. I'm just saying, it's a 10-year waiting period, so.
But then you're talking about manpower and bidding it out and try to really make headway on that 10 years. And we've discussed it. I don't know if Peter wants to jump up and give you a little bit more information of maybe what we could do to make headway. But it is, I think a lot of it really is a manpower situation. on the road betterments. I mean, we can't do them all at once.
And we can certainly plan a separate agenda item for an update come the spring as well.
Yeah, when you'll see, and you know what, these are some really good questions to ask too, is when we present the articles to the Board of Selectmen, there will be an article, I believe, on the warrant for a road taking that went in November, but it had missed a process.
Yeah.
You know, part of the process, so we can talk about that, because a lot of it too is process. You know, there's certain things that they need to do, and, you know, in order for the road to be taken.
Sam, and then Megan?
Yeah, I noticed that in terms of revenues, the Community Preservation Fund shows a decrease from the previous year. I assume that's because the state match has actually declined.
No, actually, that's the debt. So
Oh.
that's the money that offsets the community preservation debt, so the debt has decreased. The debt is declining. As you know, in 2020, it's really gonna, it will go down, it will be completely gone in 2035, so you really think you have like the golf course debt from then on, but it's really the decrease in debt.
So this is the old land bank debt that's
Exactly.
getting paid down. Thank you.
Which actually will give more community preservation revenues to appropriate,
To-
because
for-
the debt
For
decreased.
projects in the town.
Megan?
Just a couple of things. You noted that you are probably gonna be coming back with a water rate increase. And I know that at last town meeting, you know, there was some discussion about really addressing some of the disparities in those rates for the folks who are on the new sewer system, and having a broader conversation about that topic. So I just, you know, I'm sure you're going to address that, but I hope we didn't really get to circle back since town meeting on that issue yet, because we've had, you know, everything else that kind of comes between town meeting and now.
I'm
but-
really glad you mentioned that, because when that happened, we actually sent an email out to everybody, and we have a meeting this Thursday at
Okay.
9 a.m.
Great.
to talk about the sewer rate, because that's really what it is, and we're gonna see what we can do in order, you know, what changes can we make, what can we propose.
Just to know
with
what some of the
wa-
options might be, so we
Yeah.
can kind of have a presentation, a public discussion about that,
Yep.
because I know we started to have that at town meeting, but it's not the right place for that initial discussion, so.
No, it's a difficult subject, and I think town meeting heightened it, so we are getting ready, and I was looking at my calendar this week, and we have a meeting 9 a.m. Thursday morning to start that discussion, so we can give you a comprehensive presentation when we look at the water rate increase.
Great.
That would be great. Go ahead.
Yeah.
One other thing was just to point out for folks, you know, that this increase in personnel and services is really what we've been hearing from individuals. We heard it at town meeting, and we had the conversation about additional police officers, and, you know, just to remind people that that has been addressed in this budget proposal, the 4 that we talked about at town meeting.
And listening sessions.
Yes, in the listening
Right.
sessions, but, you know, that's been addressed here, as well as, you know, we just kept hearing from folks at the listening sessions, particularly the one this summer, I'm willing to pay more for taxes for better, you know, X in terms of services, so that the town could hire more folks for DPW. And so, I think it's important to recognize that that's what, you know, this budget really, I think, highlights that.
Except for we're not raising the taxes.
But
No,
it's-
we're not
exactly.
raising the taxes,
Not-
yeah.
Not more than the 2.5%.
Yes, but it highlights that desire that people really talked about, the importance of, you know, we already talked about kind of capital projects, but people really focusing on the people, you know, that really put in place all of these services. So I think it's great to see that concern was addressed here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
One more note, I just wanted to mention on the senior center. We are going to monitor the construction of the senior center, and as we get closer, we might be coming back in November, because some of the fixed cost increases, we did include some of them in the budget, starting January 1st. But if we feel that there's more of a need earlier, or more of a need on January 1st, we might look at that again in November, and I just wanted to mention that to the board, because we had extensive discussions on that.
Great, and maybe have a presentation beforehand on
Absolutely.
the status of the construction.
Absolutely.
You can ask Jim and the crew. Great, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Madam Chair, could I
Please.
just interject just for the board?
Yep.
From a housekeeping measure, just a reminder that you meet again a week from tonight, and on your agenda would be consideration for adoption of the proposed budget and transmitting it to the Finance Committee. So this 1 week period, we generally have between a week and sometimes 10 days to 2 weeks. This case, in this year, a week, given the way the calendar worked out, for the board to have further thoughts or receive additional input prior to your final adoption and transmission to Finance Committee.
Doug?
I still have a few more questions or comments on a line-by-line item that maybe some department chairs can answer.
Certainly.
That'd be great.
We welcome that.
I guess the first I'd start with is the police department, which I notice is going to have about a 9% increase. And that was for 4 additional police officers, I believe, is that correct?
Correct.
And I guess my question for Chief Dunn is, both how many more would work and how quickly can we fill them anyway? I mean, is it, in some ways, makes sense to do this a little bit by bit, because filling a police officer position is, what, about a 6 to 8 month task?
1 year.
1 year.
From the time we start the background, to get them through the academy, get them through the field training program and send them out on their own is pretty close to a year.
And if we in the pie in the sky dream said, oh, we're gonna give you 12 more, that wouldn't do you any good, because you wouldn't be able to get 12 police officers in a year.
Right now, we're in the process of filling 2 positions. And as you are aware, we are a civil service department. And when we called for the list, we had enough names on the list, but not enough people came in and signed the list. So we had to call for a second list. And thankfully, after the second list came, we got enough names, and we are currently right now doing background checks to hire 2, maybe possibly 3 off this list. Then after that, there's probably not much left on this list, and I would be waiting for the new exam in April, and I probably wouldn't see those results till sometime in the fall. So the hiring is, as you said, you could give me 20, and I don't know if I could. I'd be more than happy to take them, but it's filling the positions. We also have on our website, and we have taken our laterals from other civil service police departments, but it has to be from a civil service police department. I can't take somebody from a non-civil service department.
Good point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I have a few others, but if other people want to jump in.
Keep going.
My next is on the fire and rescue department, and I know that the fire chief, I think, had requested 10 additional firemen to add to the department. That's not what's being recommended, but in some ways, the same question I asked Chief Dunn, if we did actually do what you wanted, would you be able to fill 10 positions in the time of that fiscal year?
It would, we would be up against the same challenges.
Right.
With civil service as well. There's a sort of a global nationwide lack of paramedics that we found with the new civil service list, which we just got December 1st. So I've currently got 9 unfilled positions in the fire department. It's gonna be challenging enough just to fill those 9 unfilled positions. Again, I asked for 10 because I believe 18 firefighters across the board. I know we discussed this last time I was here. I think that 18 firefighters per shift across the board is really where we need to be. It would be very challenging to get to that at this stage. I would gladly take them. I asked for them for, clearly for a reason, but I understand the money doesn't grow on trees, and all progress is good progress. But we would have, it would be a challenge for us to fill a big group of, especially currently with the 9, soon to be 10 right now.
Now, I guess that's one reason to respond to, if you're requesting 10, why the executive board is saying, how about 2 this year and maybe 2 the next year, because even if we put 10 more in there right now, it wouldn't.
That's true. Part of sort of chasing that dragon, though, is I don't know where the call volume is going to be in a year. So hopefully hopefully it stabilizes, or hopefully we're able to get these current vacant positions filled, and then we can see. There's a 100% certainty I'll be back here next year. There's no on this particular issue, for sure. But it would be with the current openings that we have right now. With that 10 additional, it would be very challenging. I would take them. I would do my best to get it done. I would take them, but it would be very challenging to do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
The next one I think had been pointed out is the increase in the Upper Cape Regional. We don't really have any choice as to what that happens, and
Right.
certainly it is worthwhile being done. The Parks Department is one that had been put out there of a 6% increase. There's been a great deal of interest in getting more people into the Parks Department so we can get the services for the fields. And I think that also ties over to the Recreation Department, and more money into the Recreation Department also. The wastewater was an increase of 8.59%, and that is our new wastewater treatment, or increase in the wastewater treatment with a Little Pond Service Area. And the last one was the senior center, increase of 21%. When we're expecting that halfway through this year, we may be able to open a new building and have more people in there.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
Great. Anyone else?
Nope. Covered.
Mr. Suso, any final?
Just one comment, just a reminder to the board on the firefighter positions in the current fiscal year. It includes 3 additional new firefighter positions not funded previously, so keep in mind that some pretty significant numbers are going forward in fire for positions to be filled. And for the first time in a while, we're proposing multiple positions in the police department, so we're pleased that we can do that for FY20, along with, again, 2 additional positions in fire. So we've made all reasonable attempts within responsible budget to respond, as the board, as I know, is fully aware.
Thank you. Mr. Schwegel, I know that you and I have been talking about the schedule for the Finance Committee. I don't know if you have a preview that you might want to just highlight for us. I did send the schedule around to the board, but when do you expect your meetings to start in terms, if you might? Thank you.
This is on the Finance Committee meetings. Keith Schwegel, the Finance Committee Chairman. We'll start our deliberations on the 16th of, I guess it's next week, and we'll meet every Wednesday, except for February, March, and April. We're going to meet the first week on Tuesday because we couldn't get a room. So we'll meet on Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, here in the Water Department room. And the public is welcome. We don't get many visitors. It's a very fun subject, as Jennifer can attest, is that people don't want to hear it, but we would love to have people come and ask questions.
It's a fun committee, though. It's a good group of people.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
true,
good group.
that's true. So we would look forward to any people coming and listening and commenting.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Appreciate it. And thank you all.
Can I just say one
Much
thing to that?
appreciated, please.
Just to that point, if for folks who are interested, I mean, mostly, there's a lot of people here who are department heads or employees, so it pertains more to regular folks who really want to dig deeper. The Finance Committee meetings are great to go to, because that's what the Finance Committee does, and they really kind of go through that, and each group that's tasked with reviewing a particular department really digs deep on it and then reports back. So if people don't feel that they have a good understanding, or that the conversation, they want to get into a little bit more of the kind of nuts and bolts, those are great meetings to go to get a sense of that, and to really, particularly if you have something that you're really concerned about, it gets fleshed out a little bit more, just because it's a different process. So it's a great opportunity to do that.
And for anyone who can't do that, I'd suggest you just email Mr. Schwegel. Will entertain the questions that you might think about at home, and to have that walk through the process and get back to you with any answer that they can. Thank you. We're ready to move to the next. Great.
good.
Thank you all. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
If they don't mind, we don't ask them questions.
But
Not at all.
I'm doing this
That's
one
where
next.
you're you.
Okay.
Well done. Happy to do it.
Just in case.
We regret we
In case
took a
someone
little
runs
time to
in.
really
Yeah.
able to entertain us. But that's one of the reasons that's so comprehensive. You know. Hopefully we cover 99% of it. When we do read it. It shows.
Just
It
take a
shows.
2-minute break. Yeah, do you want to take a?
Yeah. We're going to take a 2-minute break so folks can clear the room. presentation tonight will be an overview. As most of you know, I am the Falmouth representative for the Assembly. I'm also the newly elected Deputy Speaker for the Assembly of Delegates. And just want to thank everyone for electing me again this year. In terms of the general proposal, or the general goings-on of the Assembly, I just wanted to put up the website and let everyone take a look at the services that we're paying for from the county, Cape Cod Cooperative Extension, the Commission, Children's Cove. Everyone always wants to know about the dredge. The new dredge is running. There are coordinated permitting efforts in the works, and there's a lot of discussion among the Assembly members, particularly from Mashpee, about another maybe smaller dredge for smaller bodies of water. So that's something that's just kind of a glimmer in one of the Assembly members' eyes at this point, but it certainly is a topic of conversation amongst many, many people. Human services, there really are a myriad of county needs, all needs of health, special focus on healthy aging, children with strong minds and bodies, addressing opioid addiction, use of alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. Fire Academy is another service. It's focused on cleaning up and improving the training center right now, particularly the educational program, including dealing with maritime fire situations and taking advantage of the blue economy and the connections in Hui and around the coast. The Assembly is continuing to address budgetary issues by getting approval from the Mass Legislature for its early retirement program. You'll see more of that. And the Cape Cod Commission, which provides planning services, has most recently worked with Falmouth with respect to the Planning Board's Davis Straits reset, and also with the Historical Commission in looking at expanding jurisdiction in Woods Hole for a more uniform approach to regulating. There is, in terms of the work of the Assembly, we started talking last year about some charter provision changes, and stay tuned, we'll be looking to perhaps add a potential recall provision. Ms. Petit told me earlier in the week that Falmouth County assessment for this year is $993,867. So that's what we pay for the county services. In terms of hoping to just some more specifics here, I wanted to put up on the board. There we go. Peter, thanks for staying there, making sure this works. So just some more services so that you can know if you want some help and consider the county for some expertise. There's water analysis and bathing beach monitoring programs. You can send your soil into the county for an analysis. The county supports Buy Fresh, Buy Local. There are child sexual abuse advocacy services, Medical Reserve Corps, there's composting information. The dredge again is mentioned. I did already mention the Fire Training Academy, food pantry projects, groundwater guardians. In terms of Falmouth's coordination with the county, we all try not to reinvent the wheel and to take good advantage of the county's research and grant services. There's the tick-borne illnesses. There's a lot of sort of cutting-edge analysis and research that goes on in the county in order to protect the entire Cape from that very serious health concern. There's River Herring Network. There's the septic system loan program. These are, just, I'm scrolling through a bunch of the services that the county provides and the Falmouth pays for, so that everyone should take a look at the website and see where you might have a need that could be provided for. In terms of transportation, One of the broad issues that we've been looking at, the Wendy Norcross from the Cape Cod Chamber started a Bridge Fix Coalition, the Big Fix. And I've been a member of that for about a year, and it's to the point now where Senator Markey's office is talking with the Army Corps of Engineers toward a long plan, which you probably read about a couple of weeks ago in the news by Secretary Pollock. So you can always go on the website and get more information about how that is progressing. I'm also chair of the Barnstable County Economic Development Council and also Falmouth's EDIC. I'm vice chair. We're currently reviewing the Cape Cod Commission's regional policy plan in the areas of coastal resiliency, community design, cultural heritage, economy, energy, housing, ocean resources, waste management, wetlands, wildlife, and transportation. We did see about a month or so ago the presentation by Christy Sanatori from the Cape Cod Commission giving an entire overview of the plan. But I encourage you to take a look on the Commission's website. If you have comments, you can email them. And later in the month, there will be sort of a follow-up meeting in terms of critiquing the suggestions. The big picture is that the Commission is really responding to every community on the Cape's uniqueness and not wanting a cookie-cutter approach because it can discourage development. The developers want to know predictability, and they want to know what is particular to each community, and the Cape Cod Commission is committed to supporting that over its next 5-year policy plan. Speaking of transportation, everyone well knows development in Falmouth is booming. There's a glam camp coming to Sippawisset. I see the town planner here. It'll be before his board pretty soon. Check the planning agenda if you want to have some interest in that. Later today, we'll be hearing from the town manager and how a traffic review is already considered in any development in town. And we particularly look at the congestion on the way to the steamship, Woods Hole, scientific organizations, and the hospital, the way that traffic converges in that one area, and it is challenging to mention. We now have some agreement from the state in terms of slowing the speed limit for a bike path crossing in that same area. And lastly, I just want to mention that the Cape Cod RTA is looking to make some small tweaks in its C-Line fixed route service, which runs from Hyannis to Woods Hole, to include the Falmouth District Court and Falmouth Hospital. And there will be a stakeholder presentation over the next week or two on that. It's just another support to Falmouth employment and economic development. That's kind of the overview. If you have any questions, happy to try to answer them, or if I don't know the answer, I can certainly get you the answers
Go ahead, Sam.
soon. Sam?
Yeah. Coincidentally, I have two neighbors, middle-aged people. They just moved into my neighborhood. They're both consultants, but they obviously use the internet for conducting their business. They don't have an office in Falmouth per se. I think they are essentially, I hope, a wave of the future. But internet services are going to be critical to supporting that kind of knowledge business. I know we've got Open Cape here. It services all the municipal buildings. But for the average person living in a neighborhood, that's not accessible. It's not affordable. And I know Open Cape has its own organization, but it seems to me in terms of regional planning, this is an area where, our Cape delegation and the Cape Cod Commission should be looking at expanding internet services. And I know I've been asking Julian to consider, when we put in that water main on Main Street, to put in a conduit so it'll make it easier for various providers to actually run communications to businesses on Main Street and then potentially branching out to neighborhoods on either side. Is this part of your thinking at this point, or are you relying on other people to do it for you?
So it certainly is a topic of conversation for the Assembly of Delegates. That's the first headline. In Falmouth, the EDIC did recently get part of a state fund that it had been going after, about $80,000. I want to credit Mike Galasso for that. We are in the process of doing the paperwork to start the planning on that. There are more funds that are expected, and the EDIC meeting, which is starting at 8:30 tomorrow morning, part of that will be discussing what the logistics of that will be, whether the EDIC may front some money as a loan as we're waiting for the rest of the state funds to come in, or, how that will logistically work out. So more to come on that. But, people are talking about municipal broadband. That's a possibility. Would it, should it be discussed that, Falmouth runs a golf course? Should it run municipal broadband? It happens in other communities. Should, as Sam suggests, should it be the county? That may be more cost-effective because the entire Cape would like open Cape-like services. The EDIC project is really just going to cover Main Street
Just a piece of it.
businesses, just a piece of it, exactly. And so I think you're right. If we look at long-term sustainability and reaching out, Falmouth's very different from Truro. Falmouth has a higher percentage vote. Falmouth's vote is something like just short of 15%. Truro's is maybe 2% in terms of the way the Assembly of Delegates percentage-weighted vote goes. But in terms of services, of course, the concept would be to cover the entire Cape, from Provincetown to, to Falmouth, Sandwich, and that should be looked at in terms of, in Truro, there might be miles between folks, you don't see that so frequently in Falmouth. So all those logistical issues should be discussed, and they're certainly on the minds of many of the Assembly members. I think you'll see that this year.
That's good to hear.
I just like to, one comment and then a question. So the one comment is, I'm so happy to hear that the transportation is going to now include 2 spots that, so many people that come to Falmouth District Court get there via bus, and they walk from, which, in nice weather is not a big deal unless you have a limitation or disability. Then it's a really long walk from up by Stop and Shop down, Jones Road. And certainly in cold and inclement weather and rain, it's really, that's a really tough thing. So, and we are going to be having a drug court in Falmouth District Court. That's something that's going to be changing. So it's I think going to be a huge service that's going to be available, as well as, that, which seems like a no-brainer, but transportation to the hospital, which again is, other towns certainly have medical facilities, but we have some really distinct facilities and services that are available in our town, and so it's great to have that transportation available to individuals. I think that's a huge increase in services for people in town. And then the other piece, I was just going to ask a question, I completely forgot. It's about the internet, just to the connectivity, to just piggyback on Sam's issue, is that, I think Falmouth, we've talked about before, that we are really well situated to be a place that can attract new economic growth and businesses. We're not that far from the bridge. We're not Truro, where you're taking a really long ride before you can get over the bridge if you have to connect to other communities. For price point, for businesses that would normally be in the Metro West area, even though our real estate can be expensive, it's not compared to those places. And for the low tax rate that we have, you get so many services, again, that aren't necessarily available in some of these other communities, and you get excellent schools that your kids can go to. So, bless you. I think that one missing component really is that tech piece, that we can, we would be able to maybe woo a larger business. Some of, like a business like Hydroid, to have some more of those, where you're bringing in professionals and then all of the staff that kind of complements that, would be such a boon to just continuing to revitalize and diversify our economy. So it's not just a tourist economy, but we have some diversity for year-round, and to just kind of grow our community. But I think that tech piece, if that's missing, the conversation kind of isn't even started. So
Absolutely, and it capitalizes on what's already here.
Yeah.
Falmouth is the mecca of all these scientific organizations, and, in terms of startups that come out of academia, all those opportunities. Absolutely right. Sam?
Just on that very same note, for a long time, the Dukakis Center at Northwestern University has a survey that a town can take. It's called the EdSat. You can go online and actually find it. But if you look down the criteria for what attracts businesses, we satisfy 95%. but that communication issue, which, by the way, I know there are people here in town, I won't mention his name, who needs to send large data files, and he is choked down. He's tried to use the library, and he can't. And when he goes to Hui and can use the Open Cape system, he said the first time he did it, he thought that the file hadn't gone. It was gone so fast that he actually sent it 2 or 3 times, and he didn't even realize it. And it's that kind of ballgame, just as the merchants here on this section of Main Street couldn't process credit card transactions, we need that kind of, and it brings the kind of people and business in that aren't gonna change our infrastructure and our density all that much. They're gonna live in homes that already exist.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Doug?
I'm just glad to hear that we're gonna get that 80,000. That's gonna complete the Main Street work, which will facilitate potentially other work in other areas of town, which may be privately funded. But that piece had to be done first.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Oh,
Madam Chair, if I just wanted to interject, I know you're reporting and very effectively on the regional transportation plan. Late this afternoon, I'd gotten an email from our Public Works Director, Ray Jack, on the Cape Cod Commission Regional Policy Plan, but a different aspect than the one you're reporting on this evening on transportation. This related to a water and wastewater issue. If I might, I thought I might take the opportunity just to comment on it. Again, I don't have all the details, but Public Works Director Ray Jack tells me that sort of tucked into an appendix in the regional policy plan is a proposal that the Cape Cod Commission would conceivably impose a nitrogen offset for developments of regional impact that are not located on the municipal sewer system of a significant sum of money. For instance, a proposed 30-unit subdivision would approximate $1.2 million in fees if it falls within the developments of regional impact area. And apparently those funds would go directly to the Cape Cod Commission. And of course, Ray Jack understandably has suggested, well, maybe to the extent that that is an appropriate course to take, those funds appropriately perhaps should come to the towns. And we note that there is a deadline for commenting of January 13th, which is prior to the next Selectmen's meeting. If the board would be, well, I'll just advise the board that I would very much like to comment on this based upon the information that Ray has provided, to provide that suggestion that the town should share in that, because obviously the solutions to wastewater lie with the towns, and Falmouth has been a good example of how that works. In fact, as we all know that are gathered here today, Falmouth is a leader in that area, and many other towns are following Falmouth's very effective lead. So in wastewater, that's no exception, of course. So I just wanted to advise the board, this had just come to my attention. It's a matter that may end up appearing in a final draft of a regional policy plan, and certainly it would have an impact on developments within Falmouth, and particularly if funds go elsewhere, it would not allow us to as effectively intercede to improve water quality and deal with the issues that we wrestle with every day, along with the Water Quality Management Committee, this Board of Selectmen, and others. So I bring that up as a point of information, Madam Chair.
in fact, part of my intent in reporting today was to do so in advance of that deadline. So I think your suggestion is quite timely to be taken up by the board.
Well, as in, we have to take her up right now.
Yes, so is there
I
any
guess
discussion on, yep.
I would start with a motion that we authorize the town manager to comment in such a manner that saying that the funds that are collected by the Cape Cod Commission should, in some share, come to the local municipality also.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
I would support that.
Aye.
And do we feel that we need to propose a particular breakdown, or just make a comment in general since it's the beginning? I mean,
I'd lean it, heavily in favor of the town.
Yeah, just, I mean.
90-10.
Right.
We're kind of out here on the end of the Cape, and we're doing our own thing, and sewer planning. When we look at regional cooperative efforts, it doesn't seem there's that much options for us to to share that, so I think you made a good point.
And we have more estuaries than any other municipality on Cape Cod that are impaired.
So start at 100.
Yeah, I'd like to start at
In
100.
other
Thank you.
words, yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Nicely done. It's really hard. Next on the agenda, we have a discussion on coordination of efforts and update on development projects that affect traffic and how they're dealt with. Mr. Suso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to provide some background information on the manner in which the staff internally cooperates and collaborates on key development issues coming before the town. We have what we've named the Development Staff Working Group. It includes representatives from planning, zoning, building, staff representatives, conservation, health, housing, and engineering. It meets monthly in informal collaborative review session to facilitate the coordination between town staff members on all development-related projects coming to the town of Falmouth. We discuss the status of the internal staff review of land use and development-related projects in anticipation of forthcoming more formal review process by the respective town board or commission involved. This includes an internal review as a matter of routine of potential transportation-related impacts of such proposed developments. So that is ongoing at the staff level internally as a matter of routine. This staff working group was originally conceived by this town manager several years ago for the fundamental purpose of facilitating the efficient internal coordination of staff reviews on all such development-related projects. And that group is routinely chaired by the assistant town manager and has been, I make many, although not all of those monthly meetings, and I'm certainly happy to report that we've been very successful in terms of our collaborative efforts at breaking down barriers, sharing information, and really reducing red tape and duplication between departments as it relates to staff review, which is so critical. And I know my colleague Peter, as I noted, is routinely chairs that group. Tom Bott, our town planner, has joined us, obviously as a matter of routine, since arriving as town planner as well. And it's really a very effective group, and we look forward to continuing their work and expanding it in whatever appropriate way it is in support of breaking down barriers and enhancing the efficiency of the development process and eliminating some of the frustrations that occasionally arise, and sometimes inadvertently. We want to root those out and be as efficient, as cost-effective, and as expeditious as we possibly can be.
One question, if I might, on that. So, in the past, really before my tenure, there was, I think it was a transportation committee as one of the town boards. And I don't know, Doug, if you ever had any interaction, or maybe whether or not it was during your tenure. I was just...
Before my time.
Before your time, okay.
It was just phasing out
when you came on. I'm just wondering whether the board might see any upside to reinstituting such a committee. I know we have, obviously, the Route 28 is a separate and really specialized group that'll be giving feedback to the board on that project. But it just seems to me, in terms of facilitating development, whether it might make sense to really always look at transportation, how it can be facilitated. You know, we really have, especially for folks in Woods Hole and the increase in the size of the terminal potentially, there's concern about if that could draw additional traffic. There are already tough questions about the traffic along the hospital lights, folks trying to get their kids to school on time and then trying to get to work on time. And, Ray Jack always says, I don't know the exact quote from Mr. Suso, but essentially, our roads just, they can't be made any wider for the most part. And so we really do have a limitation in terms of how we can move people. And so I just wanted to throw that out there since we're on the subject. Megan?
Yeah, I think that, given that we have a lot of sort of projects that are going on and that we know are maybe in the works, both, town projects and other projects like, say, the Steamship Authority, the rebuild there. I think that getting a sense of, that how traffic can flow, what, if anything, can be done, and particularly now we're getting ready to kind of do this project along Route 28. It might be something that is worth considering. I know Jane Perry is a huge advocate. I know that was sort of her, her baby for a long time. And it certainly paid, that committee and the work of Jane and others kind of paid some dividends in terms of improvements that were made in town. I guess, we might want to take a look at what the previous scope was and if that's appropriate and why it maybe fell apart and didn't continue to be as viable or as useful, in the last few years as it had been. But I think it's, any opportunity to maybe get community input around a subject that's a constant concern wouldn't be, I don't think there's any real negative to that. I mean, it's just an opportunity for an ongoing conversation.
I think there are also quite a few other new things that could be put into it, such as the wayfinding.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there something this committee could do to come up with a strategy for saying these roads are going to be closed to truck traffic? Recommendations about the private road takings, maybe that could be something else that they're involved in, is the process that they would be a committee that people would go to if they want to have their private road taken by the town. I know the issues that Sipwisset Road and Quistit Ave had with the signs being put up for controlling speed. That could be another issue that a committee dealing with transportation, and certainly on public transportation, is something that we would want to have them involved in also. Is great having these two new stops on the court and the hospital, but maybe there are other places this committee could help in giving some input on that. It may be that we're giving them way too much to do, but.
Yeah, I'm actually on the advisory board for Cape Cod Community Regional Transit Authority. And they are, as you mentioned, looked at changing the Sea Line route, but they're also looking at the Whoosh shuttle service and what they can do with that in the summer. I know there's a meeting coming up. Unfortunately, it's the first day of the MMA annual meeting, which means I won't even be able to participate in it. But I know that Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority is trying to reach out to the town and figure out if there isn't a better shuttle service that could be used here in Falmouth. They certainly have extensive shuttle service in Provincetown for the summer activities up there because they have even a bigger traffic issue and people needing to move throughout the town to go to various venues without stalling the normal traffic in the town. But I know Tom Kerr, the director of the Regional Transit Authority, is looking at this seriously and will be looking at potentially trying some routes in the way of localized shuttle services, more or less in the downtown and servicing the Woods Hole community as well. But that's being looked at.
Megan, just one other thing. I mean, I agree maybe the scope gets too big, but maybe it's not because some things are time sensitive. But one other thing that we've talked about a number of times that there isn't really any, there's not a designated group of people to work on it, but we've talked before about parking around the beaches, parking around directing folks for Shining Sea, parking around downtown activities, just sort of assessing how do we address kind of our all-around shortage of parking at at the high peak of summer. So it might not be a bad idea. I think there's no shortage of things that could be looked at in more detail. And we have committees for many other things, but not, transportation kind of crosses and touches upon, obviously a lot of different work that other committees are doing, but we don't have a centralized group of people looking at it. So I would be for it.
So maybe for a future agenda item, we could get the town manager to coordinate with town council and look at all of those, start looking at the goals that the board might have and how those might go together, and nexus with, maybe reinvigorating the Transportation Committee
And
with some new goals.
And we also recently had a presentation by Ray Jack about some of the intersections that could be improved on his own initiative, so maybe they would also take up that same initiative.
You're speaking of the 151 corridor?
Well, there was Sandwich Road
Okay.
corner,
Yeah.
he was gonna put a left turn there instead of that island that's there.
Mhm.
There were several good ideas that.
Great.
Very good.
Anything else? Okay. Next, we have minutes of meetings, a public session for December 3rd. Sam?
Madam Chair, I have one question on the very first line on page 2. It says, Mr. Brown has worked with Mr. David Rogers in the past, and he does believe it will affect his ability to vote on this.
It does not.
I think we need a nod in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good change. Anything else?
No, that's it, and I would say I found this substantially correct, so I would vote approval and release to the public.
Second? Oh, I'm
there-
sorry.
I think there was one more thing that needed clarification at the end, if you could just give me a second. Sorry, I didn't make a note of it.
Well, I'll move approval with whatever Selectman Brown
Okay.
finds after. if it's-
Trusting him.
Yeah,
I think
he's an honest guy.
It was
that's
just
too
a
much of a
language thing.
Yeah,
Great.
so I think we just have to vote on it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
I,
Aye. Next, we have individual selectmen's reports. Mr. Brown?
well, I met with the representatives of the age group today, and was hoping that they would be receptive to some suggestions for another location. Currently, they're hoping to work with the neighbors and show what good neighbors they can be. So that's their first plan. I got a brief explanation about how they intend to roll out their services very gradually. At the end of March, they plan to only operate the needle exchange part of the job for 1 day a week. A few weeks later, they'll go to 2 days a week, and ultimately in the summer, it'll only be 3 days a week, and always ending by 3 p.m. Their whole philosophy is gonna be to really move slowly and start out slow, and work with the neighbors and put up fences if they want them, or do whatever it takes. And they're not planning to attend on Saturday. That's the Board of Health meeting. They are gonna give us as much information about their operating procedure and their rollout plan prior to that. And I also suggested that perhaps they could bring some letters of recommendation from their current neighbors and abutters, which he said he can do. So that's all we know for now, and I plan to attend on Saturday to represent the little that I know.
Thank you, and I appreciate you taking point on this issue.
Okay, thanks.
Sam?
Well, yeah, I've already covered a couple of the items. Participation in the CCRTA Advisory Board meeting that happened in December. Also, there've been 2 meetings of that High School Field Advisory Committee in considering the bids, and so that was already covered. And tomorrow, the school committee should be acting on letting a contract go for that work. And the last item was just this Saturday, participating in the Eagle Court of Honor for Zane Otter on your behalf to read the proclamation there. It's always a great gathering. I thoroughly enjoy doing that. I think another one coming up this Saturday.
Thank you for that. Megan?
I know that we've already had a conversation about a possible future agenda item for bikeways, but there's another one that's a little bit more time sensitive, I think. And I did speak with bikeways. They had their meeting. I couldn't attend, but I addressed issues ahead of time with Chair Scott Lindell. And there is an upcoming, I think the deadline is actually February 1st, for an application for the Mass Trails funding. And I know Bourne is putting in an application it's around the design and engineering for that first section of the Shining Sea bikeways. Bikeways would like to send a letter to sort of support. Scott first wanted to make sure if it was appropriate or not. And then they're also wondering if the board will share in that. So I don't know if we can, I think it'll be a very limited agenda item, but maybe if it's possible to squeeze something in for our next meeting, so if something's going to be done, it can be done prior to that February 1st deadline.
I think Mr. Suso might have anticipated that. I think you might have a.
I know they were raising another issue that we addressed.
Something was received on that, I believe.
Okay.
I don't remember all the details.
I can forward this and we can, but my point is just, I think, we had this discussion when Peter spoke about the potential project on Palmer Ave. I think, it's really important for the voice to come from the community and for it to be a consolidated and just coordinated message. So if we can have some conversation, Bikeways certainly is its own committee. They're gonna do whatever they're going to do. But I think if I think we should just have a conversation, as brief as it might be, with this board, so that we can make a recommendation, and that if there's a message that comes from the town, it's something that's coordinated, and that we don't have conflicting messages or, conflicting.
Points, I think that's a great idea. I think we should agenda it for the next item. We'll need to speak with Bourne, I guess, about if that impacts. There are three choices of plans: the expensive plan that has a completely different bike route versus the rail trail share versus, so I think we need to have get the background maybe from the Bourne town manager, if, as much as we can, about the status before the meeting, but certainly let's agenda the meeting. And
Well, I can assure you that the difficulty is going to be to determine exactly what they're proposing. And I appreciate Megan raising the issue she did, because I think it's, I certainly agree that it can be very confusing if a standalone committee contacts a state funding agency. It can be very confusing as to whether that is the town's policy, yay or nay.
Right,
And we've been asked, as we've reported on that in the past, by some state agencies to, will we let them know, will the real Falmouth please stand up? And so we gotta be, I think, cautious that any particular committee does not take a position, send something out on letterhead, which gives the impression that they're blessing something and the selectmen are totally left out of the loop.
I think that's why Scott is
Well, that's why
bringing,
you've
I mean, I
raised
think
it.
that's the whole point of Scott's email to me was to make sure that we're all on the same page and that things are, I think, Bikeways is trying to be really aware of wanting to keep projects flowing in a positive way. And obviously, they have priorities for that committee that are shared by a lot of individuals. But I think his goal in writing, I know that his goal in writing the email to me was to coordinate that. So I think that they're trying to take to heart the message that we got from Mr. McConerty.
And that's how I'm hearing. Peter?
Yeah, if I could weigh in at the risk of overstepping and oversimplifying, the Board of Selectmen is the chief policy-setting board of the town. I would respectfully suggest that if a state agency is going to hear on a policy matter from the town, any advisory committee, bike or otherwise, should make a recommendation to this board, and this board should send the recommendation.
I think he's happy. I think that's what he's,
Okay.
that's
to put it on
basically
the
what he's
agenda
at.
and have the
Yes,
dialogue.
what he's asking is, what's the process?
That's how
Can
I'm
we get
hearing.
on, because we had talked about putting another agenda item for theirs, but it was gonna be later in February. And so I think he's bringing this to the attention to try and get that process going.
Great.
So I don't think it would take probably 10 minutes at the most, probably not even that much, if we were able to get the background information in our packet.
And I just wanted to say it really simply because there might be other committees
Absolutely.
out there, and I don't want them hearing, oh, well, maybe we can send a letter to a state agency.
Right.
Yeah,
Please don't.
well said, Peter. And just to interject, I think Sue, you alluded to that as well. It's critical that we know exactly what they're proposing, because as this board is aware, you struggled with that whole issue on the routes, and there was a point of view that came out of our neighbor to the north that was a sort of a take it or leave it point of view on what they wanted to do, but it compromised some future options for the town of Falmouth and this Board of Selectmen, depending on the route that was taken and what was embraced. So that is a critical piece for us to know in advance, so that we don't send out a mixed message.
And I think it's critical for us to revisit that issue now, because it's been certainly
been a
maybe
while.
6 months or so,
Right.
or more since
And I
we've
think
heard
the
that.
goal in this is, my understanding, and it's limited, and we can get a presentation, but my understanding from Patty, through Scott, is that it may avail some funding opportunities for our last mile, regardless in some ways of what ends up happening in the latter section. So again, maybe we can just have that sort of fleshed out, have that conversation, and then the board is gonna do whatever the board's gonna do.
Great. So if Scott can send all the information he has to Peter and Julian, that would start the ball rolling.
Yep. Great, thank you. That's all for me. Just wanted to
Super.
touch
Doug?
on that.
Two issues that have come to me from people out there in the town. One is dealing with the Shining Sea Bikeway by Trunk River, is how much that has washed away in the storm about a month ago. And if we don't do something, even if it's emergency, we really are in danger of having that sewer line underneath it get washed away. And I'm not sure exactly how we proceed with that. I know the Concom, I'm sure, does not want us putting up Jersey barriers, but if we don't put up something, I know there are some DPW orange barrels blocking it off, but it's one more storm and it could be a real problem. Second one someone asked me about was at Estia, there was no light at the street light at the crossing. And I mentioned this to Mr. Suso 2 days ago, and there is now, it is hooked up. And just another reminder to people, if you have concerns, pass them on to us, pass them on to the town manager, and sometimes they can be taken care of within 24 hours. It will happen much faster if we know about it, as opposed to just complain about it. So thank you very much for getting
Another
it taken care
future,
of.
future agenda item, if we could discuss parking planning.
Send me an email to avoid open meeting law issues. Just send me an email and.
Okay.
That did come up in the discussion.
Peter?
I've been working on mostly personnel matters that are not ripe for public discussion.
Thank you.
So the non-report, thank you for that. Mr. Suso?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief update. On Thursday, January 3rd, I attended the regular Senior Center construction meeting. As per usual, we reviewed updates and construction progress with the contractor, owner's project manager, clerk of the works, and others. Building Committee Chair Jim Vieira also joins us as a routine attendee at that meeting. We are scheduled to meet with the Senior Center Building Committee at an upcoming regular meeting on Tuesday, January 22nd. And again, those are two separate groups. And although the Christmas and New Year's holidays have intervened, excellent progress continues on the Senior Center project. And seeing it from the vantage point of the second floor of the Gus Canny Center really is insightful in terms of what's occurring on the lower underground level, or soon-to-be underground level. So that's all going forward. Also, I wanted to, I had an item come up very late this afternoon, and it is somewhat time-sensitive. I did have an opportunity, I briefly emailed the board, but I just wanted to note it. Madam Chair, members of the board, our tree warden, Jeremiah Pearson, has inspected a tree that was brought to his attention on the Main Street portion of the library lawn. It's a Norway maple adjacent to the sidewalk and near the Veterans Monument area. And it is, Jeremiah has confirmed that it is heavily diseased and in danger of toppling, particularly in the anticipated upcoming winter storms. It could cause some damage to the veterans' improvements there and/or pedestrians or vehicles in the area. As it is a hazardous tree, we've checked with town council. It does not require a shade tree hearing, and I'm giving Jeremiah the go-ahead to remove it. It is different from the other species of trees in that area, so it is really an outlier in terms of trees. So with Jeremiah's able assistance, we'll certainly maintain that corridor, planted corridor, but this tree really needs to go before it causes some damage to life or limb, and I wanted to advise the board of that this evening because of the timeliness issue we're dealing with.
And I saw as well that you coordinated with many town services, including the library.
Yes. So I want to let them know. And beyond that, Happy New Year to all.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Group photo.
Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by Meganet Communications. Meganet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their #1 goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.